From the Broadcast Center at BCIT's Burnaby Campus, this is All Talk Radio. You're listening to 1680 The Crow.
Good afternoon and welcome to your 12 p.m. news update. I'm Madison Buckingham and you're listening to 1680 The Crow. Here's a look at what is happening in the world today. An update on our top story today. Atrocities are continuing as the Israel-Hamas war is in full effect. 2 Canadians are confirmed dead and 1 is presumed dead, according to Foreign Affairs Minister Mélanie Joly. The minister updated the public on plans to assist departures from Gaza and surrounding areas starting by Thursday or Friday. Taking a look at provincial news, the victim has been identified in the investigation of a homicide that happened in Vancouver last month. Ricky Martinez, a 44-year-old, was found in critical condition near East Hastings and Corral in the early mornings of September 28th. Martinez was taken to hospital but did succumb to his injuries. The VPD are not releasing any details of his injuries or why they are ruling it a homicide. No arrests have been made and no information has been released regarding suspects. More from BC Police. Prince George RCMP have charged a violent offender with 9 crimes after a police chase through the city early Monday morning. Reports of a breaking and entering situation came in from a business. Police say that when they responded, the suspect fled in what was determined as a stolen vehicle. The offender drove dangerously into oncoming traffic before RCMP deployed spike belts. The suspect then proceeded to steal an ATV from a bystander before crashing and ending the chase. Upon arrest, they found the suspect to be identified as John Robert Barton Craig. More from the province today. New data shows the number of individuals experiencing homelessness in Vancouver has risen to 32% this year compared to 2020. Our reporter Ben Bugera explains more about how one group is disproportionately affected.
The region's population, Indigenous people represent a third of Metro Vancouver's homeless population. This comes as new data from the Homelessness Services Association of BC shows a dramatic increase in the homeless population over the last 3 years. According to the report, close to 60% of Indigenous people experiencing homelessness are unsheltered. Over 60% of the population reported having a history with the residential school system. Ben Bugera, 1680 The Crow.
Federal Health Minister Mark Holland is meeting with other provincial and territorial health ministers in Charlottetown today. Reporter John Kennedy has the details about what they met to discuss.
Holland says the meetings will be focused on attracting new workers to the healthcare field and retaining the doctors, nurses, and technicians Canada already has to alleviate the healthcare worker shortage. He says the health ministers need to look at foreign credentials and pan-Canadian licenses as 2 options. The meeting in Prince Edward Island comes on the heels of British Columbia signing the first bilateral funding agreement with Ottawa as a part of the health accord the Prime Minister offered premiers in February. John Kennedy, The Canadian Press.
This is the first time these ministers have met since Mark Holland took over the health file. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is off to visit the Northwest Territories today to look into the areas that were destroyed in this year's record-breaking wildfire season. Reporter Karen Ribaud has more details about the disastrous impacts it has had.
The Northwest Territories saw nearly 70% of its population displaced during this year's unprecedented fire season, including a 3-week evacuation order that forced around 20,000 people to flee the capital, Yellowknife, and a nearby First Nation. Today, the PM is expected to visit Hay River, where he'll meet with local leaders and visit some fire-scorched sites. A fast-moving fire in August ripped through the highway hamlet of Enterprise, south of Hay River, destroying nearly all of that community's homes and structures. 95 wildfires were still burning in the territory as of yesterday. Karen Ribaud, The Canadian Press.
More from the environment. October is prime mating season for spiders. Our reporter Brooke Jensen finds out about a research project into a foreign species.
The candy-striped spider made its way from Europe around 100 years ago. Since then, it's slowly spread across North America. Catherine Scott, an entomologist in Newfoundland, and her team are finding out what benefits and risks this spider has to the ecosystem.
I also have a student who's working on understanding what habitats it occurs in and where it doesn't, and she's finding that it seems, at least here where I am in Newfoundland right now, that it seems to like sort of invasive plants and weeds more than native plants. It might also eat pollinators, though, so I'm interested in kind of what the balance of those effects might be.
Scott also has a community science page. where you can upload photos when you see the spider in your area to help them in their research. Brooke Jensen, 1680 The Crow.
I'm going to turn it over to sports now. The NHL resumed yesterday, and the Vancouver Canucks play their first game of the season tonight. Our reporter Anthony Atanasov has more on how the BC food and drink industry will be affected.
NHL action returns at Rogers Arena tonight with the Vancouver Canucks facing the Edmonton Oilers. Fans aren't the only ones excited, as food and drink services are expected to see an increase in business. Sporting events typically draw people to the downtown Vancouver area, which also increases the demand for food, beverages, but most importantly, a place to just watch the game. Ian Tostenson, president of BC Restaurants and Food Association, explains the ripple effect the NHL season will have on the restaurant industry.
Going to the game and maybe having a snack or dinner beforehand. You'll get the after dinner crowd that goes, our after game crowd that'll go up, maybe have a drink or beer and celebrate or do whatever. And then you get you also get the effect of all the people that are in the stadium that are working, that invariably are heading out and might grab a snack.
Vancouver Canucks will be back at Rogers Arena when they host the Philadelphia Flyers on October 11th. This is Anthony Atanasov with 1680 The Crow.
Anthony joins us live now for an update and more information. So, Anthony, what factors would help increase business for BC restaurants during Canucks games?
Well, Maddie, I had the privilege of talking to Ian Tostenson, who's the president of BC Restaurants and Food Association. And, it's high-profile games, whether it's stat-padded teams or stronger teams, they will generally draw a larger audience. And if fans are actually going to Rogers Arena, they want somewhere that can provide a quick snack, whether it's just happy hour or for just a quick drink. They're trying to catch the game on time. Prices tend to be more expensive at the arena, and it sort of provides an incentive for these places. For fans that aren't going to the arena, the bigger the TV screen, the better. And if the Canucks actually make the playoffs, well, that typically rakes in about $1 million per game in incremental sales.
And why are the food and drink industry in particular going to see an increase in business?
Well, you get a bit of a ripple effect. Usually if people are going to the game, they want happy hour beforehand, and then you'll get people after the game having a celebratory drink or a dinner from a premium place. And then you get all the people that work in stadiums that once they're actually off their shifts, well, they need somewhere to eat as well. And with the ongoing labor shortage, which has sort of been ameliorated with food delivery services increasing, alcohol is also being available through some of these services.
That's fair. Why does hockey have this effect of drawing people downtown?
It's not just hockey, although Vancouver in particular does have quite the dedicated fan base. But when it comes to any events, whether concerts or sports, it will draw people downtown. Even if people aren't going to the arena, the vibe or atmosphere it produces in the downtown area has this sort of drawing effect. And, even Ian Tostenson typically speculates that you get about 16,000 people heading downtown during some of these events.
That's so fair. Thank you so much, Anthony. I'll let you go with the rest of your day, and good luck.
Thanks, Maddie.
More from the NHL. All 7 Canadian teams are taking to the ice tonight for their first appearance this season. Ottawa is the only team that will be playing a non-Canadian team, as they will take on the Carolina Hurricanes south of the border. In the East, the Maple Leafs are playing rival team, the Montreal Canadiens, at home. Puck drop for both of these matchups is at 4 p.m. today. The Winnipeg Jets are in Calgary facing off against the Flames. In BC, the Canucks are hosting McDavid and the Oilers. Both of these games start at 7 p.m. Now for a quick look into the MLB playoffs. There are 3 games on today. The Atlanta Braves are in Pennsylvania today playing the Phillies to take the lead in the 1-1 series. Pitcher Spencer Strider spoke today at a press conference about how he's feeling going into it.
I don't know. I don't know that I'd say we have a rivalry necessarily. I think that word gets overused a little bit, but we want to beat everybody we play.
The game starts at 2:07 p.m. Later today, the Houston Astros are in Minnesota hoping to widen their lead on the Twins. The series is 2-1 for Houston. They will take the pitch at 4:07 p.m. Finally, tonight at 6:07 p.m., the LA Dodgers are in Arizona to get back into the series with the Diamondbacks. The Dodgers are facing an 0-2 start going into the third game. More from the NHL. The executive director of the Professional Women's Hockey League is expressing distaste at the NHL's ban on Pride tape. Brian Burke is calling this lack of support from the league a serious setback. The LGBTQ plus advocate says that this decision goes against inclusion and progress and warns that it makes certain fans feel unwelcome. The Pride tape ban accompanies the league's ban on thematic alterations to jerseys. This includes Military Appreciation and Black History Month. Looking forward to the 2030 Olympics, officials from Sapporo and the Japanese Olympic Committee have announced that the city has withdrawn from their bid to host the Winter Games. Japan is saying that their citizens are resistant to support the government after a series of corruption cases in the country last year. 15 people from 5 different companies faced trial for the bribery scandal. The games are likely to land with a favorite in the running, Stockholm, Sweden, with Salt Lake City, Utah looking popular for the 2034 games. Now for a quick look at the weather. It is currently 16 degrees Celsius with temperatures expected to stay around there before the sun sets this evening. The clouds are set to clear up this afternoon, but the sun will be accompanied by 20-kilometer winds. This evening we'll see patches of fog and temperatures will drop as low as 8 degrees Celsius. This has been your news to 12:12 p.m. Thanks for tuning in. We'll be back at 12:30 with an update. I'm Madison Buckingham, and you're listening to 1680 The Crow.
Stay tuned for more on BCIT's 1680 The Crow.
Everything is changing to digital. Everything is online. People aren't just waiting for the 6 o'clock news anymore. People want their news right now. They want to be able to go onto their smartphone, onto the internet, and see the news that they want to see.
Vancouver is growing at, a really rapid rate, the Lower Mainland even, and with the tools that we're given here, we're able to cover all of that.
Welcome to BCIT Magazine. I'm Radhika Sikakane.
In the program, they really leave it up to you. I mean, the help is there when you need it, figuring out how to use the programs like Premiere, Audition, and figuring out how to use the cameras. But it's up to you to sort of experiment and figure out what you can do when you go out in the field.
They brought candles and flowers to remember the student who lost her life yesterday.
Theresa May says the international community condemns Moscow.
They really make sure that you know the basics and you are able to put out a quality product.
I'm Brady Tretnero.
And I'm Radhika Sikakane. Thank you for tuning in to BCIT Magazine.
This is 1680 The Crow, and you're listening to our feature presentation.
May is Mental Health Awareness Month in Canada. There's many different ways people cope with mental health issues, and today we are taking a look into an outlet used by many, music. Today's interview is with the lead singer of Confessions of a Traitor, a band whose lyrics are inspired by their own mental health struggles and trauma, who hope others can use their music as an inspiration to push through and keep going. Welcome to 1680 The Crow. I'm Zach Clark. Today my guest is Steve McConville, the lead singer of the metal band Confessions of a Traitor. Steve, thank you so much for joining us. I'll get right into it. When was the moment you decided to make kind of more heavy, emotionally charged music as opposed to, any other genre?
It started pretty early on, but it's primarily because I tell you what, if I could sing like Scott Stapp from Creed, I'd be in a band like Creed. But unfortunately, I haven't got pipes like him, and I really enjoy breakdowns. And bands like Creed and Alter Bridge don't really have breakdowns. So I've kind of got to have this like nice balance of heavy kind of melodic music with a little bit of feeling behind it. So yeah, it started really early on when I was listening to bands like early Trivium and early Killswitch Engage.
Great influences. And was that kind of around the time you decided to form Confessions of a Traitor? Is that your first attempt at making kind of more emotional, heavy music like this?
Yeah, so I've always been into heavy music, but I used to play rugby as it was kind of like my career for a long time. And then I kind of got over it very, very quickly. And I've always been into music in the sense that in school I was in choirs, I was in church choirs and stuff like that as a kid growing up. So I've always sang and always been really, really interested in music, but never really had the confidence to join a band or anything like that. Tried a little bit in school, but we did like a couple of practices and nothing ever came to fruition. So I think I got to a point where I was like, well, if I've got to do it, I've got to do it at some point. So why isn't some point now? And that was about 7 or 8 years ago when I decided to kind of go full bore into music and start writing and kind of expanding, or I guess pushing myself in the direction of being in a band. And then I met the guys online, and they had some like original songs written, but had been in a few previous bands and wanted to start a new band with a new singer, and were kind of looking kind of into that heavier genre, like that metalcore genre. So that's when I kind of came along and I've done a couple of recordings online and stuck them up, and we kind of bonded from there. And I came down for an audition, and they kind of offered it to me there and then, and that was it. So it was one of those things where it was kind of born out of frustration and a willingness to kind of throw myself into something brand new, and something that I really enjoyed, and something that I thought I could do, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely it does. You guys have been around for a little bit of a while now, but I think your latest album's probably your most popular, I think I'm correct in saying. What were the primary inspirations behind your latest album, Punishing Myself Before God Does?
So, a lot of it was written during the pandemic, as you're probably aware, but it's one of these things where it was like, it's not directly about the pandemic. So it's not like, there was a virus, and a lot of music at the time that was being released and now is kind of reflecting on that from a geopolitical and socio-political perspective. And I'm not a political person, as much as I know that kind of has a big influence on life. Like, I'm a very emotive person, and I'm very in connection with my emotions, and I use music as an outlet for like a kind of cathartic outlet for my expression. So for me, the pandemic was a very slow and segregated time. I caught COVID 3 times. I was really sick with COVID. I ended up in an ambulance on a ventilator. And a lot of people that I knew at the time were affected quite badly by it. We had family members die. We had a lot of people we were separated from pass away, just through some instances it was age, some instances it was disease and stuff like that. And we never really got to see them before their passing. And then there was a lot of breakdown of relationships, whether it was friendship, whether it was romantic relationships within our kind of friendship group. And a lot of things happened over 2 years, but because you couldn't really do anything within that period of time, it felt more intense. So it's a really intrinsic look on how that period of time affected us as a group. There's a couple of songs that I directly can look at and have a snapshot as to where I was and how I felt at that exact point. And a prime example is the song "To Care for Those Who Care for Us" is about family members with dementia. Now, 4 of the 5 members of the band have had a family member, whether it be a grandparent, aunt, or uncle, with dementia over the last 2 years. Now, 3 out of the 4 of them have now passed away, with one still in palliative care because they're so regressed at that stage. So for us as a group, that song has such a powerful connective meaning, and it's almost like a celebration of their life, as well as an emotional catharsis for us writing that. That's one of those kind of I remember when I was writing as the lyricist saying, how do you feel about me writing a song about our family who are passing as we speak? So that's one of the kind of ways that I feel that the music and the lyrics were channeled in that period of time.
Yeah, that song is probably one of the more emotional ones. It's actually probably my favorite track on the album. So, that's definitely a really hard thing to have to go through. And I mean, what are some of the difficulties in reliving your traumas? Does it kind of take a toll on yourself when you're having to relive this to write it?
Initially, for sure, because what you're doing is you're digging up the past. You're digging up, and especially if it's something you haven't dealt with. It's one of these things that the more you write about it, the more you're like, well, how did I feel? What is the message that I'm trying to convey at this point in time? And with that, you get this raw kind of feeling again of grief. And whatever whatever the song was, "To Care" is just an example, because 4 of us went through that. There's been a lot about the breakdown of relationships within that period of time, and a good number of the bands went through. A good number of the band members went through, breakups and things like that, and that was channeled again into the record. And you think about it at the time, the plaster was pulled off, it happened, and then you're like, oh no, I wrote a little bit at the time, and I reflected on how that person felt. And then you talk to them and say, well, tell me how you felt during that time, because I really want to convey that message within this song. And then you'd be digging up their emotions as well as your own at the time. And, it gets quite emotive when you're doing it. And then you've written the lyrics, and that's one part of the process. And then the other is recording it. And you're like, oh, okay, well, now I've got to kind of unlock that feeling again, and then portray that in an emotive way. You can't just put on a face of I'm just going to get through it. It's a case of I really want people to understand how everybody feels at this point in time, so that they get the message through. And then the kind of third and final time is when you play it live for the first time, and you look around, and "To Care" again is a prime example, because the first time we ever played it live was at our album release show. And the song I started with the lyrics, and it gets to this middle 8-bit, which is really calm, and there's a little bit of spoken word there. And I turn around as I'm singing, and I look at our drummer, and he's starting to cry. And then I'm like, well, I can't look at him because I'm going to go. I look at our guitarist, and he's going. And I'm like, well, I look at the other side of the stage, and he's going. And I'm like, well, I've got to go now. So everyone's kind of like, there's not a dry eye on stage, but then everyone else in the crowd feels it as well. So when you have that connective moment, when all the pieces fit in for that final time, and then you realize it's not just you who's gone through that process, that there are other people that relate to it, like you were saying yourself, like you kind of get this like, oh, the relief kind of, like the weight lifts off your shoulders. So it feels like, as painful as it is to do and as painful as it is to write, it sits with people. And that I feel, for me, like it's like genuinely writing from the heart. And I feel a much greater connection with people that way.
Absolutely. And how has being in Confessions of a Traitor affected your own mental health? Has it kind of made it better as having an outlet, or has it almost made it worse, forcing yourself to go through it again?
No, it's made it better. And I'm generally speaking a super positive person. And the guys in the band really do mock me for it. They're like, you're always so positive. Like, you know, if anything goes wrong, you've got the solution, or you're working towards the solution, or you're trying to find the solution rather than wallowing. But my issue has always been, because I've gone to find the solution, I've never addressed the issue. And as I've gone kind of deeper into Confessions, it's allowed me to reflect and kind of sit back and think, well, actually, maybe that does need to get addressed. Maybe a positive outlook 24/7 is actually as detrimental as, being negative all the time, because you never really address it. You kind of brush it under the carpet. So I actually feel like my emotional intelligence has risen quite significantly, because I want to address it. I want to sit there, and you should take time to process grief and loss and, the breakdown of relationships and friendships. You should take that time, because it's the only way that you're going to grow as a person. And if you just dismiss it, or you just or you spend too long wallowing on it and you don't grow and learn from it, well, then you're just going to make the same mistake again. And I think that for me has allowed me like a much greater insight as to how to deal with bad situations and come out on top.
Absolutely. So what kind of music can we expect from Confessions of a Traitor in the future? It's a similar sort of genre, any ideas branching out?
Well, let's put it like this. It's going to be as emotional, because I'm knee deep into writing as we speak. I'm always writing stuff, and I'm like, God, I'm really unlocking something from that. I feel like Punishing Myself Before God Does was the first time I really kind of let loose in an honest way. And like you said, it's been our most successful record to date. And, we charted on the Billboard charts, which was incredible, which we'd never thought would tens of times now. And it's like, okay, well, let's really kind of chase the rabbit down the hole and pursue this super emotional side. And the lyrics I'm writing at the moment are definitely kind of reflective of that. I'd be lying to you if I said that we weren't writing music as well, because we are. I think that's just a natural process. We're always writing. And there's definitely, I think what we're trying to do is we're trying to diversify the sound a little bit, in the sense that if we're going for a heavy song, it's going to be a heavy song. If we're going to go for a kind of slow, kind of emotional song, it's going to be a slow, emotional song. And, really kind of focus on diversifying the sound in that format. And I want the music to lead how it feels a little bit, because sometimes I feel like I've written super positive lyrics over a very dark song, or super negative lyrics over a really happy sounding song. So I almost want the music to kind of, sit down, listen to the music and go, how do I feel? How do I feel when I hear this? Because if it's super sad and super slow and I'm going, yeah, life is really great, people are really happy, people are going to be like, oh, there's a bit of cognitive dissonance there.
From the Broadcast Center at BCIT's Burnaby Campus, this is All Talk Radio. You're listening to 1680 The Crow.
Good afternoon, Burnaby. I'm Chris Koo here with your 12:30 p.m. news. Israelis come together to help one another as they mourn the dead and struggle with the repercussions of the Hamas attack. Julie Walker from the Associated Press reports.
Israeli-American Talia Klein-Perez was born in Houston and moved to Israel 22 years ago. She says many of her U.S. friends don't realize how bad it is.
It's heartbreaking. There's pretty much no one here that wasn't affected.
She's volunteering at a shelter near her home that took in more than 100 families, including 90 children from a kibbutz near the border.
Some of us are braver than others. Some of us are actually going closer to the front lines to bring warm meals and food and anything that the soldiers may need. Some of us are more frightened, like me.
Despite everything going on, she says her family is not leaving Israel. I'm Julie Walker.
Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly says the federal government will begin to airlift Canadian citizens, permanent residents, and their families from Tel Aviv by the end of the week. She says Canadian Armed Forces flights to Athens will be arranged in the coming days, and the government will help arrange flights to Canada. As of Tuesday, Joly says there were 4,249 Canadians registered in Israel and another 476 in the West Bank and Gaza. She said Canada will work with the United Nations if there is an evacuation from Gaza, but so far there are no such plans. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau will visit the Northwest Territories today, where he will see firsthand some of the areas ravaged during a record wildfire season. Karen Reboot from the Canadian Press has the latest.
The Northwest Territories saw nearly 70% of its population displaced during this year's unprecedented fire season, including a 3-week evacuation order that forced around 20,000 people to flee the capital, Yellowknife, and a nearby First Nation. Today, the PM is expected to visit Hay River, where he'll meet with local leaders and visit some fire-scorched sites. A fast-moving fire in August ripped through the highway hamlet of Enterprise, south of Hay River, destroying nearly all of that community's homes and structures. 95 wildfires were still burning in the territory as of yesterday. Karen Rebo, the Canadian Press.
In other news, the victim of a homicide in Vancouver's Chinatown neighborhood last month has been identified by police. The Vancouver Police Department says Ricky Martinez was found gravely injured in the area of Carroll and East Hastings Street just after 5 a.m. on September 28th. He was taken to the hospital but did not survive his injuries. To date, no arrests have been made in connection with the 44-year-old's death. Meanwhile, the homicide investigators spent hours on scene collecting evidence. According to Surgeon Steve Addison, while we don't have a suspect in custody at this time, we're hoping and trust that the evidence that we collect will lead us to the person who is responsible for this. October is prime mating season for spiders, and our reporter Brooke Jensen finds about a research project and a foreign species.
The candy-striped spider made its way from Europe around 100 years ago. Since then, it's slowly spread across North America. Catherine Scott, an entomologist in Newfoundland, and her team are finding out what benefits and risks this spider has to the ecosystem.
I also have a student who's working on understanding what habitats it occurs in and where it doesn't, and she's finding that it seems, at least here where I am in Newfoundland right now, that it seems to like sort of invasive plants and weeds more than native plants. It might also eat pollinators though, so I'm interested in kind of what the balance of those effects might be.
Scott also has a community science page where you can upload photos when you see the spider in your area to help them in their research. Brooke Jensen, 1680 The Crow.
Today's weather will be cloudy with 30% chance of shower this morning, but clearing this afternoon. And tonight we'll have clear fog patches developing later this evening. And that's all for the afternoon news. I'm reporting from BCIT Burnaby Campus with 1680 The Crow.
Stay tuned for more on BCIT's 1680 The Crow.
everything is changing to digital. Everything is online. People aren't just waiting for the 6 o'clock news anymore. People want their news right now. They want to be able to go onto their smartphone, onto the internet, and see the news that they want to see.
Vancouver is growing at, a really rapid rate, the Lower Mainland even, and with the tools that we're given here, we're able to cover all of that.
Welcome to BCIT Magazine. I'm Radhika Sikakane.
In the program, they really leave it up to you. I mean, the help is there when you need it, figuring out how to use the programs like Premiere, Audition, and figuring out how to use the cameras. But it's up to you to sort of experiment and figure out what you can do when you go out in the field.
They brought candles and flowers to remember the student who lost her life yesterday.
Theresa May says the international community condemns Moscow.
They really make sure that you know the basics and you are able to put out a quality product.
I'm Brady Tretnero.
And I'm Radhika Sikakane. Thank you for tuning in to BCIT Magazine.